So hello everyone, I'm Dr. Janet DeMille, Medical Officer of Health of the Thunder Bay District Health Unit, and welcome to another session of Ask the MOH. So there's going to be 4 questions that you have submitted that I'm going to answer today. So can I have the first question?
Sure can. Okay, our first question asks, are we able to get tested for antibodies if we think we may have had COVID-19 before March?
So that's a great question and an important question. So at this time, there is no test that's being used for testing for antibodies, and that person who's asked that question is correct in that if once we have a test available, we could potentially check whether somebody has been previously exposed to the virus, because the antibodies that are produced when somebody is infected can be detected through that test. And that will be an important test as we go forward and continue to manage COVID-19, there's a lot of value to a test like that. Right now, though, as I've indicated, there is no test that will check for antibodies that is currently in use or that's currently available. I'm understanding that one has been approved, but it still is going through testing, and it is testing of the test actually. And it is important that that be an accurate test. And so that's what's proceeding right now. But stay tuned. At some point, I am hoping that we will have a test like that available.
Great. Question 2 asks, I don't have any symptoms. Should I get tested?
So that's a really hot topic these days, right? So we've heard a lot about it recently, what we are trying to do in the province, and certainly that we're encouraging people, is we want to see very good testing going forward. Not only will it help if people sort of identify if they're actually infected with COVID-19, but it also provides, testing people also provides us a way of monitoring very carefully what's happening in the community. So the issue of people being tested when they don't have any symptoms. So currently what we know is that individuals are eligible for testing even if they don't have any symptoms, if they fall in one of 2 groups. If you have a concern that you may have been exposed to COVID-19. Maybe you were around somebody who was sick, who themselves may not have been tested, and you think you may have acquired the virus, so you're concerned about having COVID-19. Or maybe you were somewhere or in a place where you believe that there might have been somebody with COVID-19. You would be eligible for testing even if you had no symptoms. The other group of people are people who may be interacting with the public or with others as part of their job. So individuals who serve the public, like frontline workers, grocery store people, or people in other retailers that are now open, transit operators, for example, frontline, like healthcare workers, of course, and first responders, where there may be more interaction with others. Even if you work in a workplace and you're returning to work where you might be around workplace colleagues, you would be eligible for testing even if you have no symptoms. I do want to stress, though, that I'm certainly encouraging anybody who does have symptoms to get tested. That will be an important part of our strategy going forward. And so that remains a group, even if you have very mild symptoms, and even if it's just one symptom that you have, please go get tested. I want to, though, get back to when somebody gets tested who doesn't have symptoms, what that test result means if you're negative. In other words, you found that there was no virus found, and you get a negative test result. Unfortunately, there's a lot of limitations to that particular result. It really represents only a point in time. That's your situation when that test was actually taken. What we know is somebody could be exposed to the virus, they could be incubating the virus, so they don't have any symptoms, but 2 days later they may actually have symptoms of COVID. And if you get tested during that incubation period when you don't actually have symptoms, the result can be negative. but you still had the virus there, and you get sick even a few days later. And so that's a significant limitation of that test. So it's important to realize if you get symptoms shortly thereafter that you need to get retested. And it doesn't, that a negative test doesn't really clear you to sort of go and do something that you might not have otherwise done, just because you could get exposed to the virus the next day, for example, or as I said, you could be just incubating the virus. So there's significant limitations of a negative test result in somebody with no symptoms, and I think it's important that we all be aware of that.
Okay, great. The next question this individual asks, he says, I have to travel for work. I am avoiding flying, but I will have to stay in hotels. What can I do to minimize my risk in addition to physical distancing and hand hygiene?
Okay. So if you're staying in hotels, there is guidance for the hospitality industry around all the measures that they could put in place to ensure that people staying with them, like somebody staying in a hotel, are protected from COVID. So hospitality industry, of course, includes hotels and other motels, for example. So you can look on the hotel website or call them in advance to make sure that they've implemented those measures. And you could ask them what measures they have implemented. We would certainly encourage, the usual physical distancing measures on any of your travels and any of your time that you're in the hotel. So try to maintain that 2-meter distance from anybody else when you're traveling and when you're in those hotels. If you feel that it might be difficult to do that, or you're seeing a lot of other people around, or you're in an elevator, for example, that's where it's good to have a mask that you can put on when you can't necessarily physically distance. Similarly, like when you're in your room, you can wipe down some of the high touch surfaces or the things that you might be using, like the remote control or the phone, the alarm clock, for example, if you're using something that's in that room. That just consistent with the message about cleaning and disinfecting high touch surfaces. So there's some examples of what you could do when you're traveling and staying in a hotel.
Great, thanks. So our last question this week says, with more and more of the community opening up, can I go and have a driveway visit with a friend?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So if you're going to have a visit with somebody, like outside, and I'm understanding driveway visits, or you're going to be, potentially interacting with a neighbor or somebody else, kind of in your front yard or in your driveway area. It's important to make sure that you're maintaining or practicing all of the measures that can reduce the risk of the virus going from one person to the other, sort of either way. So being outside is a very good thing because it's very likely that the virus just transmits a lot less when somebody's outside as opposed to being inside in an enclosed space. The virus is much more likely to transmit inside. So being outside is a good place to do it. Maintain that 2-meter distance. So, just hang out, but maintain that particular distance. Don't interact and don't go visit anybody who is sick, or if you're sick. If you're coughing or sneezing, please stay home, right? Because you could have the virus, and even if you're maintaining that 2-meter distance, you just don't want to put anybody else at risk. So I think that's a very fundamental measure. And remember that there still is an emergency order in place provincially that limits any gatherings to under 5 people. So you could be, you'd be violating that emergency order if you were to meet with a larger group than that. So just be mindful of that.
Great.
So I think that ends our questions for today. So I want to thank you very much again for submitting the questions, and I hope you have a great day today.